plane hums steadily through the sky, the rhythmic sound of the engines almost hypnotic. Barron Trump sits in his seat, his red Make America Great Again hat snugly atop his head. He gazes out the window, watching the world below grow smaller as the plane ascends. The air is cool in first class, and the soft hum of chatter from the other passengers lulls him into a quiet contemplation. He's on his way to a leadership seminar in California, a trip that's both exciting and a little nerve-wracking. It's his first time traveling alone without family. At 18, he's used to attention, often unwanted, but today feels different. The hat feels like a weight on his head, despite the proud reason he wears it. The moment Barron steps onto the plane, he feels the subtle shift in the air. The eyes that follow him are familiar, but today they're more intense, more judgmental. He's been here before, of course. Being a Trump isn't something he can escape, not even on a plane. His father's legacy, the policies, the controversies, it all follows him, even when he just wants to be a regular college student. Barron settles into his first-class seat, trying to ignore the side glances. He adjusts his hat, pulling it down just a little more, and pulls out his phone. He hopes to focus on the seminar materials he's supposed to review, but his attention keeps wandering back to the stairs. Just as he starts to open his textbook, a flight attendant approaches. She's young, probably in her 30s, with a no-nonsense look. Her name tag reads Melissa. "Excuse me, sir," she says, her voice sharp. "I need to ask you to remove your hat. It's against the policy to wear headgear on the plane unless it's for religious reasons." Barron looks up, surprised. "I'm sorry, what? That's not the policy." "I know what the policy is," she snaps. "But that hat? It's offensive to a lot of people, and we're trying to maintain a comfortable environment for all passengers." Barron's eyes narrow slightly, but he remains calm. "It's just a hat. I'm not bothering anyone." Melissa crosses her arms. "That's not the point. We can't have people on this plane spreading hate." A few passengers glance in his direction, their whispers barely audible over the hum of the plane. Barron feels his chest tighten. He doesn't want a confrontation, but he's not going to back down either. "I'm not here to spread hate," he says firmly. "I'm just wearing my hat. It's a symbol of pride for me. I'm not asking anyone else to agree with it. I'm just sitting here, trying to get to my destination." Melissa's gaze hardens, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Well, if anyone complains, we'll have to address it again." She walks away, but Barron can feel the tension in her words lingering in the air. His hands instinctively grip the armrest. He didn't expect to have to defend his choice of clothing, but here they are. As the plane begins its climb to cruising altitude, Barron tries to settle into the flight. He opens his textbook again, but his mind isn't on the material. He's thinking about Melissa, about her words. He wonders if she really believes what she said, or if it's something deeper. A few minutes later, Melissa comes by with the drink cart. She barely looks at Barron as she offers him a choice between water or juice. "Water, please," he says, his voice steady. She hands him the cup with a stiff smile, clearly doing her best to avoid eye contact. Barron notices the tension in her shoulders, the way she grips the cart just a little too tightly. As she walks away, Barron reflects on the encounter. He can feel the weight of her judgment, but something about it feels off. She's angry, but at what? At him? At the hat? Or at something else entirely? The flight drags on, and Barron notices Melissa's behavior becoming more tense as the hours pass. She's short with other passengers, snapping at one elderly woman who accidentally spills a drink, and ignoring the requests of a young father asking for help with his child's seatbelt. Something isn't right. Barron can sense it. He watches her as she moves down the aisle, interacting with everyone except him. He's not sure why, but he can feel a sense of unease growing in his stomach. There's something personal in the way she holds herself, something deeper than just her disapproval of his hat. A thought strikes him. Maybe Melissa is more than just annoyed with him. Maybe she's upset about something else. Maybe she's been hurt in ways he doesn't understand. Barron shakes his head, pushing the thought aside. But as the plane continues its journey, he starts to wonder, if kindness is the answer, why is it so hard to practice? Why does Melissa seem to have so much anger and frustration inside her? When the flight reaches its final stretch, Barron decides he's had enough. He can't just sit quietly and let this happen. He needs to speak up, not because he's trying to make a statement about politics or policies, but because he's beginning to understand something important. Kindness, above all else, matters more than anything else. As the plane begins its descent, Barron stands up from his seat, looking down the aisle. He sees Melissa standing near the front of the plane, preparing for the final service. The moment feels right. He takes a deep breath, walks toward her, and catches her attention. "Excuse me, Melissa," he says, his voice calm but resolute. She looks up surprised. "Yes, sir." "I just wanted to say something," Barron begins, his words coming slowly but firmly. "I know you're upset with me about my hat, but what I want to say is I'm not here to spread hate or division. I think we all should be kinder to each other. You never know what people are going through, and maybe we could both use a little more kindness, don't you think?" Melissa blinks, clearly caught off guard by his words. For a moment, she just stands there speechless. Barron continues. "I get it. The hat probably represents something different to you, but it's just that, a hat. It doesn't change who I am as a person, and I think we can all agree that loving each other, even when we don't agree, is more important than anything else." The air between them feels tense, yet there's something undeniably soft in her gaze now. For a moment, Barron wonders if she'll reply with more anger, but instead Melissa's lips part, and she seems to consider his words. Finally, she speaks. I didn't expect that." Barron gives a small, understanding smile. "I didn't expect this flight to go the way it did either, but I'm glad we're having this conversation." Melissa stands there for a long moment, her face unreadable as she looks at Barron. The tension in the air, once sharp and almost suffocating, now feels different. Lighter, more uncertain. She blinks rapidly as if trying to process the words Barron has just said. Barron stands quietly, waiting, his heart thudding in his chest. He didn't expect this interaction to go this way, but now that he's spoken up, he feels more at ease. There's a strange sense of calm in him, the kind that comes from saying exactly what's been on his mind without worrying about the consequences. Finally, Melissa sighs and shakes her head, a slight frown on her face. "I guess I wasn't expecting that," she admits, her voice softer than before. Barron nods, offering her a smile. "I know. I didn't mean to make you feel uncomfortable. I just thought, maybe you didn't see it the way I do." Melissa tilts her head slightly, her lips curving into a small, tentative smile. "Yeah, maybe." She exhales deeply, as if trying to shake off some invisible weight. "I'm sorry if I've made things awkward. I've had a lot on my plate lately. It's hard to see things clearly when you're carrying so much." Barron raises an eyebrow, genuinely curious. "What do you mean?" For a brief moment, Melissa looks away, her gaze drifting toward the front of the plane. Then she turns back to him, her expression more vulnerable than Barron had ever expected. "It's just, life, you know? Things haven't been easy lately. Work, personal stuff, it all just piles up." She pauses, her voice quiet. "I guess I let it get the best of me. It's easier to be angry than to deal with it all." Barron nods slowly, understanding more than she might think. He's had his own share of struggles, even if they're different from hers. He's always lived with the expectation of being perfect, of living up to a legacy that's not his choosing. And sometimes it feels like a heavy burden to carry, one that isolates him from others. But in that moment, as he looks at Melissa, he realizes that they aren't so different after all. "Anger is easier, isn't it?" Barron says thoughtfully. "It's a shield, but it doesn't really help." Melissa's lips twitch into a reluctant smile. "Yeah, I guess you could say that." She takes a breath, her posture relaxing just slightly. "You know, I thought I was just doing my job, but maybe I was projecting more than I realized." Barron takes a small step forward, his voice gentle. "It's okay, I get it. We all have our days. But kindness is always the better choice. It doesn't cost anything to be nice, but it makes a difference." There's a quiet pause as Melissa looks at him, her expression softening. She seems to be weighing his words, taking in the sincerity in his voice. For a moment, Barron wonders if this is all going to blow over, if she'll go back to being distant and cold. But then something shifts. She exhales, her shoulders loosening, and she takes a step closer to him. "You know," she says, her tone lighter, "I think I needed to hear that. Maybe I've been holding on to a lot more than I should have." Barron smiles, grateful that the conversation is shifting in such a positive direction. It's never too late to change the way you see things. Life doesn't have to be a battle. If we all just worked on being kind, it'd be a lot easier to find peace. Melissa nods, visibly moved by his words. "You're right. I've been so wrapped up in everything that I forgot what really matters." She pauses for a moment, then looks at him with a hint of surprise. "I didn't expect this conversation to turn into whatever this is." Barron chuckles lightly. "Neither did I, but sometimes it's the unexpected things that teach us the most." For a few moments, neither of them speaks, simply letting the silence settle between them. The noise of the cabin, the chatter of the passengers, feels distant now, almost muted. The only thing that remains is the connection, however brief, that they've just shared. "Thank you," Melissa says quietly. "I know I don't know you, but I think you've reminded me of something important. I'll try to do better. I'll try to be kinder, not just on the job, but in my life." Barron's heart warms at her words. "It's not always easy," he replies, "but it's always worth it." With a deep breath, Melissa straightens her uniform and offers Barron a genuine, almost apologetic smile. "I'll let you get back to your seat, but I really mean it. Thank you." Barron smiles back. "I'm glad we talked." As she walks away, Barron watches her for a moment, a sense of quiet satisfaction settling within him. He didn't expect this flight to turn out this way, but sometimes the greatest lessons are learned in the most unexpected moments. As the plane continues its descent, Barron feels a renewed sense of hope. He's reminded that kindness doesn't have to come with an agenda. It doesn't matter who you are or where you come from. It's about spreading warmth, even in small, seemingly insignificant moments. And in that moment, Barron feels more certain than ever that he's on the right path. The hum of the airplane engines fills the cabin as the flight continues its descent toward its destination. Barron leans back in his seat, his mind still processing the conversation he had with Melissa. It's not every day that someone takes the time to open up like that, and he feels a quiet sense of accomplishment. Maybe it's a small thing, but in a world that often seems dominated by division, it's a win. He looks out the window once more, watching the ground slowly inch closer as they near the airport. He's used to the noise and attention that comes with his last name, but there's something about today that feels different. Today, he was able to break through that invisible wall of judgment and negativity, and in doing so, he'd reached someone who needed it. As Barron begins to gather his belongings in preparation for landing, he hears a familiar voice. It's Melissa, approaching once more with the drink cart. But this time, there's no tension in the air, no sharpness in her tone. Instead, she walks with a softness, her shoulders relaxed, and her expression gentler. "Hey, Barron," she says, her voice carrying a more personal warmth than it did earlier. Barron looks up, surprised but pleased to see the change in her demeanor. "Hey, Melissa, everything okay?" She nods. "Yeah, actually, I've been thinking about what you said earlier, about kindness. It's funny. I've always been so focused on what's going wrong in the world that I forgot what's going right." She stops in front of him, offering him a smile. "And I guess it's easier to focus on the bad things because they feel more real. But kindness, like you said, makes things feel lighter." Barron smiles. "It really does. It's amazing how small acts of kindness can have such a big impact, even on people we don't know." Melissa gives a little laugh, her eyes meeting his with a soft sincerity. "Yeah, I guess I've been so focused on the weight of everything I've been dealing with that I couldn't see how much light there really is. But hearing you talk, it was like a wake-up call." Barron feels a rush of warmth. This wasn't the direction he had expected the conversation to take, but he's glad they're here now. "I'm really glad to hear that. It's something I think we all need to remember from time to time." Melissa's expression softens even more as she looks at him, and for the first time, Barron feels a sense of real connection between them, like two people from completely different worlds who found common ground. You're a lot wiser than I gave you credit for, Melissa says, chuckling slightly. I've got to admit, I was kind of judgmental at first, but I think you might be right about a lot of things. Barron shrugs modestly. We all have our moments. I'm just trying to do the right thing. And I think kindness is a good place to start. For a moment, they just stand there in quiet companionship. It's a rare moment of peace on an otherwise hectic flight, and Barron feels a deep sense of contentment in it. As the flight nears its final stages, Melissa starts to move toward the back of the plane, but before she goes, she stops and turns back to Barron. Hey, I don't know if this is weird, but I've been thinking, is there anything I can do for you? I feel like I owe you a little more than just a thank you. Barron shakes his head, laughing lightly. You don't owe me anything. Honestly, just the fact that we were able to talk like this is enough for me. Melissa smiles. Well, if you ever need anything, don't hesitate to ask. And I mean that. She hesitates for a second. And Barron? He looks up, giving her his full attention. Thank you, she says sincerely. I think you helped me more than you realize. Barron smiles warmly, feeling a sense of satisfaction that goes beyond words. I'm glad I could help. As she walks away, Barron feels the weight of the conversation lift off his shoulders. The rest of the flight goes by quietly, and as the plane touches down, he can't help but reflect on how unexpected this experience has been. When the plane finally comes to a complete stop at the gate, passengers start to stand up and gather their things. Barron gathers his belongings slowly, savoring the peaceful moment. He hasn't had much experience connecting with people in this way. Not in a setting like this, not with someone who initially seemed so distant. But this conversation with Melissa felt different. It wasn't about politics. It wasn't about anything beyond simple human kindness. As he exits the plane, he looks around for Melissa, wanting to thank her one more time. When he finds her near the gate, she's speaking with a group of other flight attendants. She looks up and sees him approaching. Hey, Barron says, giving her a small wave. I just wanted to say, again, thanks for being willing to listen today. I think we both learned something from this. Melissa nods, her smile warm and sincere. No problem. And hey, if you ever need someone to talk to, whether it's about kindness, hats, or whatever, I'm here. Barron laughs, feeling a lightness in his chest. I'll keep that in mind. As he walks away, Barron realizes that sometimes the most important connections come from the most unexpected places. His encounter with Melissa, though brief, will stay with him for a long time. Several weeks have passed since Barron's flight with Melissa. He's returned to his routine, the whirlwind of his public life never truly slowing down. However, the memory of that day lingers in his mind, vivid in its simplicity. He's often found himself reflecting on how one brief encounter had the power to change something inside him. And, it seems, something inside Melissa, too. Melissa, too, hasn't forgotten the unexpected kindness Barron showed her on that flight. Her life had shifted in subtle ways since their conversation. She found herself more aware of how quickly she could fall into judgment or frustration, and how much better she felt when she chose kindness over criticism. It wasn't always easy, but the small, everyday choices added up. It had started with a simple act, offering a genuine apology, something she had never been good at. She had sent Barron a letter, just a short note to express her thanks and tell him that the way he had responded to her had truly changed her perspective. And much to her surprise, Barron had written back, encouraging her to keep her commitment to kindness, telling her that the world needed more people like her to spread that message. She had to admit, it had been a moment of vulnerability for her, a moment where she was truly humbled. Back in the present, Melissa is walking through the airport terminal, preparing for another shift. The typical stress of work is still there, but it's lighter now somehow. She has a new outlook, and she feels a sense of peace she hadn't had before. But today, there's something new on her mind. She's been thinking about Barron again, and the kindness he shared with her. It's something she's trying to pay forward in her own life. It's in the small interactions, like the way she greeted a nervous passenger this morning, or how she helped an elderly woman with her carry-on bag without a second thought. As she walks through the crowded terminal, a familiar face catches her eye. She stops dead in her tracks, her heart skipping a beat. It's Barron, standing near the gate with his bodyguard, his expression calm and focused as he checks his phone. For a moment, Melissa hesitates. She wonders if it's appropriate to approach him. After all, they're both in a public space now, and she doesn't want to intrude. But something tells her that this is the moment to act on the change he had inspired in her. She takes a deep breath, walking toward him. "Barron?" she says, her voice catching slightly. Barron looks up, surprised to see her. A smile instantly spreads across his face, his eyes lighting up as he recognizes her. "Melissa," he says, his tone warm. "I didn't expect to see you here." Melissa smiles back, feeling a spark of gratitude for this moment, for this unexpected connection. "Yeah, I've been working a lot of flights lately. I guess you could say I've been thinking about what you said." Barron raises an eyebrow, intrigued. "Oh? What about?" Melissa takes a small step forward, feeling a sense of confidence she hadn't had before. "About kindness, about how much it can change everything. I guess I wasn't really paying attention to how important it is until you reminded me." Barron's smile softens, and there's a quiet understanding between them. "I'm glad to hear that. It's funny. You never know how a single conversation can have such an impact." They stand there for a moment, simply sharing the connection between them, before Barron speaks again. "You know, I've been thinking about that flight too. I really appreciate how you took the time to listen, even though you didn't have to. You really opened my eyes to something." Melissa feels her heart swell. She didn't expect this acknowledgement, and it touches her deeply. "I guess we both learned something from each other, huh?" Barron nods. "Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in our own lives, in our own struggles, and forget about the little things that make a difference. But in the end, kindness is always worth it." "Exactly," Melissa agrees, feeling a rush of warmth. "And it's a reminder that we all have the power to make the world better, even in small ways." Barron looks around the terminal briefly and then turns back to her. "You know, I think that's the most important lesson anyone can learn. We might not change the whole world, but we can change the people around us. And that's enough." Melissa nods, feeling the weight of his words sink in. It's exactly what she's been trying to live by lately, and it feels like she's on the right track. For a moment, there's a pause. The noise of the terminal fills the air around them, but it feels distant, almost like it's fading away. In this brief moment, the world seems a little quieter, a little more peaceful. Then Barron smiles again, his expression light and genuine. "I have to go, but I'm glad we ran into each other. Take care of yourself, Melissa. Keep spreading that kindness." Melissa smiles back, her heart feeling full. "I will. Thank you, Barron. You've really made a difference in my life." As Barron walks away with his bodyguard, Melissa watches him for a moment, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. She may never have expected this moment or the way it would shape her life, but she's glad it happened. As she heads toward the gate to board her own flight, she feels something inside her shift, something that feels permanent. She's not the same person who got on that plane all those weeks ago. She's kinder, more patient, more willing to listen. And she knows that if Barron's message of kindness can make this much of a difference in her life, it can make a difference in the lives of others too.